Thank you all very much for coming this evening, on such a miserable evening, too. But this reading is always a lot of fun because it's the last one of the semester in the fall and in the spring. And as you can see, I don't know, those of you who are new to the college wouldn't know, but this is the first semester that we've had this new design for the magazine. Excuse me. We're very proud to have this package looking as nice as it does. But it would be just a collection of blank pages if it weren't for the contributions of the members from the 3 counties that the college serves. And it's always very gratifying at the end of each semester to receive so many excellent submissions. And myself with a staff of editors who are listed there on the inside, it's a labor of love. We do it every semester. And it's a great way to highlight and bring attention to writers from the community, students, and photographers now especially, who are writing poems and stories from Southern Maryland, and it's a joy to be a part of this, and I really do appreciate the opportunity each semester to wrap things up, as it were, with this final reading. So welcome, and it is a very informal reading. And those of you who are going to be coming up to talk about your work, you can give a little background if you want, or simply just read from it. It's totally up to you. And we'll just go one person after the next. Okay? Is that good? Okay. Welcome. So let's start with Dee.
Hi. My story's on page 5 of your book, and I'm reading from my own copy because I broke my glasses and I'm dealing with old ones. Okay, here we go. This is a story that's part of a bigger story. It's going to eventually be part of a novel, I hope. His boots solidly grip the ground as the spade jabs the soil like a knife, making the first cut. Russ scoops the clod with the end of the shovel and slings it to the side. The sun glints against the metal and strains his eyes. Dirt sprays over the ivy and brush, crumbs sticking to a tree's bark. It's about dinner time, and the sun is just thinking about setting, getting lower in the sky, peeking its saffron farewells through the tree branches. Halloween was a few days ago, and yesterday Lyndon Johnson won the election. But the firehouse is quiet tonight. There have been no calls, and Russ is doing an all-nighter. 2 of the men have to be at the firehouse around the clock, and he's keeping his scheduled shift since Charlotte's still in the hospital. Charlie's watching the station, and he said he'd holler if he needed anything. The siren will call if there's a fire. His boots reestablish the ground beneath them, and he prods the ground again with his shovel, his hand stinging from the grip he's got on the wooden handle. The steel hits the earth, and it sounds like a bat hitting a ball in a baseball game. Home run. He slings the dirt again, tries to get a motion going. Dig, sling, dig, sling. Never get this damned hole dug. The air's getting cooler as the sun goes down, and the breeze smells of autumn, dried leaves, and decay. Behind him, a couple of yardsticks away, waits the box, the one they gave him at the hospital. Could have been a fruit crate, really. Oranges or apples, about that size. Do they keep a stack of crates there just for this kind of thing? Maybe there's a storage room full of these boxes. Or had they found one just for him? Is this something other people do? No need to open it. His goodbyes have been said already. He's dug plenty of holes in his life, put in fence posts, felt the hardness of the clay when the post hole digger hit it, and felt the ground give like a woman as she's just giving in to a man, kind of opens up, accepts the intrusion and softens, allows the invader to enter it again and again, deeper and deeper forming a cavern that's ready to accept what it's made for, a planting, a seed, a post, a wooden box, a child that he loves already, a child that he never got to know. Sweat and tears are wiped from his chin. That gets slung too. Firmly, he grips the handle again and stabs at the ground with the point of the spade. Dig, sling, feels like 100 times over. Finally, it looks like it might be deep enough. He looks at the box, steps over toward it. After laying down the shovel, he picks up the little coffin, hands on each end, no heavier than a sack of flour. He sets the box in the cavity, but it's not deep enough yet. Doesn't even cover half the side of the box. He clicks his tongue against his teeth, shakes his head. Sweat drips in his eyes, and he takes the back of his hand and wipes his forehead, puts his hands on the side of the box again, picks it up, and sets it back behind him. He gets into a motion then, with a fury that he's not had yet. He digs and slings, until he's sure that hole is deep enough. He feels the soil under the shovel give way, little by little. As the cavity grows deeper and wider, he thinks about needing it to be deeper, only deeper. Don't cut more into the sides. In the hospital, they'd told him they could take care of the body. They'd bury it in someone else's grave. He couldn't imagine laying his baby to rest with a stranger. Charlotte hadn't cared what they did. She'd said it wasn't a baby anymore, but he'd seen it. He'd seen his baby. Jacob was perfect. 10 fingers and toes, small, like a baby monkey almost, but dead, stillborn. A man shouldn't have to do this, shouldn't have to bury his son. I'm going to stop there, so we have plenty of time for all the readers.
Hi, my name's Sherby, and the poem that I wrote is called The Great American Novel, but I'd like to explain something about it, if I could, for a minute. And that's that I wrote the word I about 20 times in this poem, but it really has very little to do with me. It has a lot more to do with some of the people sitting in this room. I wrote this poem for my high school English teacher, and she's probably never going to read this, but you will, and she's never going to hear the expression of my gratitude, but I hope that you will, because every person has just this profound ability to make an impact on other people's lives, and the power of one sentence that she told me as an impressionable teenager completely altered the course of my life. And so I'd like to express gratitude for that, and to you, the people who, 20 years from now might get their thank you. I'd like to give it to you today. So this is my way of doing that. The Great American Novel. 20 years ago, you told me that I would write the great American novel someday. I did. I wrote it in the smiles I've left on the faces of strangers. I wrote it in the scars I carry on my arms. I wrote it in fingerprints left on a NICU incubator. I wrote it in tears that fell to meet an ocean of salt water. I wrote it with my knees and forehead buried in the sand. I wrote it in the soil of every garden I have planted. I wrote it in the sideline hug offered on strike 3. I wrote it in dinner pots that burned as we danced in the kitchen. I wrote it in finger-painted pictures proudly displayed on my refrigerator. I wrote it in doggy kisses when I've been away too long. I wrote it on the bridges I've burned and built along the way. I wrote it in the capture and release of dreams and fireflies. I wrote it in my heart that now travels the world in 3 smaller bodies, and I wrote it in the eyes of the one that I call home. This is the first opportunity I've had to reflect with pen in hand, and yet the language that you gifted us has found me desperately wanting for a vocabulary far greater than mine. And so I will collect my memories that never made it to a camera, along with the untamed words that were never sheltered by leather binding. With blank paper and pen in hand, I carry the great American novel inside of me, and I will continue writing it because you told me that I could.
My story is on page 24. I wrote it a couple months ago after I had this dream about a dancing girl. So, here we go. Lila always smiled when she danced, and she danced often. She danced in the kitchen while the water boiled for tea, or after a shower, naked and perfect, spinning water from her pale skin like a white rose in the morning dew. She danced at church when the Spirit took her, with arms raised above her head and bent so elegantly in front of God and congregation. She twirled about, always smiling, and they saw that it was good. In the night, Lila visited me in my dreams, a dusk-born nymph who smiled when she danced. She fluttered in a red dress that flowed with silk and brushed off her legs like feathers. A ruby-throated wonder, scarlet bird of paradise, but the boys chased her. Her rare beauty on display to be desired, envied, remembered. A beauty that never lingered. It appeared only to evanesce and leave behind a faint shadow of memory to dance circles around me, still smiling. She asked me, "Do you think I'd dance for you?" "No," I said. "I don't know." She laughed and continued her dance. She danced in spite of me. My awestruck gaze could never stall her movements. She danced like a meteor on a fiery route, unaware of gravity's pull. I stood by her, stiff and constant, hoping to catch a glimpse of her smile or feel the pulse of her eyelashes, long and heavy, almost strong enough to carry me away on a breeze. She fanned the crowds that always found us, a mob, speaking scrutiny in one collected voice in envy of what they could not understand. My Lila, I felt she kept a secret sadness, a source of dread, buried in plumage, insulated deep in the warmth of her chest, but apparent to me in a subtle step or behind the gleam of her eyes. A creature from a place beyond could not live indefinitely in a world like ours. She was a hungry beast with an appetite that went unsatisfied. She danced over the crust of a withered earth, breathing life through her smile into its half-shed skin, aged like autumn leaves and marbled gray in passing time. And time took its toll on Lila. By and by, she stopped dancing. I don't know why, but something left her, and something left me as well. Things lost in life cannot always be replaced. As a snuffed ember is unable to rekindle, Lila was a great flame, unsustainable, melting down the candle to be drowned in wax, leaving me to wander around, my milky eyes sunken low, searching for something else to watch and thinking, where did all the voices go? Where are the flowers, birds, and breeze? My Lila left me, and when she stopped dancing in life, she stopped dancing in my dreams.
My name is Rachel Heinhorst, and my poem is on page 14. My poem is called Angels, and I wrote this poem for Michael Glaser, and if those of you in here who know him know that he truly is an angel, and I believe that he is someone who was meant to be a good friend of mine. A little bit of story about the poem is the first line in the poem, I met with him for coffee, and he actually said the first line of the poem to me somewhere along the lines in conversation, and I reached my hand across the table, and I grabbed his, and I said, I'm going to use that one day in a poem, and I did. So this is Angels for Michael, and he couldn't be here this evening, but I did read this to him earlier today. He says he talks to angels, says they are here all the time, all around him. I sit across from him at a small cafe table. We've met for poetry and friendship, and today he says he can see in me that I need them both. He says not to be afraid, to ask for what I want, that if I don't, no one will hear me, and I think of the people coming in and out of this place, the people in this place, with laptops open, newspapers open, and I think that maybe I am to look closer at these people, to think that they too must need angels sometimes, that because like me, they are human and things happen that hurt, that make them feel stillness, a staleness, like nighttime in a scared child's bedroom, they're peeking out from the covers into what seems like a forever darkness. Every human being loves something deeply. I love my daughter's face. She loves her best blanket, dry or warmed, thrown over her like a parachute before I kiss her goodnight. My father loved the way his left bicep pronounced his Jimmy tattoo. It is being alive, and here these people around me are no different. Perhaps we are all angels. We feel, we cry, we search for answers, come to help a friend. And maybe I've been someone at a distance, someone who gave a smile, held open a door, gave small talk about sun or rain on a day it was needed. I needed this day with a friend, needed to know I was being thought of, cared about. My daughter will feel a warm blanket tonight, and the next time I see my father, I'll ask him for the story of his tattoo.
Hi, I'm Livia. My story is on page 36. I wrote this probably 3 or 4 years ago. The original is in Portuguese, which is my first language. So I translated this for my creative writing class last year, I guess. And I decided to submit it to the magazine. So the story is Just a Coffee, Please. A bell tinkled when I pushed the door. The cold and furious wind continued to blow outside, so I was even more tempted to go in. It was cozy, warm, and smelled like coffee. It calmed me. I sat at the very last table and was contemplating the busy street through the window when an excited voice pulled me to reality. Hi! It was the waitress. Are you ready to order, sir? She was nothing more than a girl, probably in her early 20s. Her brown hair was tied in a messy bun and kept falling in her also brown and bright eyes. She smiled at me, holding a pad with her tiny hands. Her fingernails were painted with orange nail polish, showing how young she was, how innocent she was. What was wrong with me? Sir, are you ready to order? She repeated. I looked away from her hands and focused on her face. She looked anxious, trying to get a piece of her hair out of her eyes. A coffee was a good idea. She smelled like coffee. Just a coffee, please, I said. She rolled the order on her pad and smiled. Right away, sir, she said, walking away from me. I forced myself to not look at her. She was new there and just a girl. A girl I had just met. That was not right. Angry with myself, I looked around. That cafeteria was a nice place, always warm and full of people. It was filled with laughter and cozy smiles. It was my small piece of heaven, where I could run away from real life. That itself was already a very good reason for me to go there. The coffee was taking too long. I looked over to the counter and saw the girl trying to operate the machine. There was coffee all over the place, and she had this angry expression on her face. I heard her curse several times, but didn't move a finger to help her. I knew she just needed to press a button, and could have told her that. But I was hypnotized by how her face changed from angry to frustration, and then to relief when she finally found it. Nobody was paying attention to her, just me. Maybe I had another good reason to go to the cafeteria. Here's your coffee, sir, she said, handing me the cup. Our hands touched, and we both smiled with embarrassment. Sorry for the wait. It's okay. First day? I asked. Is it that obvious? She said, giving me a frustrated smile. No, you did good. Relieved, she smiled an even bigger smile and thanked me. Where I work, everybody hates their jobs, and I never see a smile. And there was this girl, probably working for the first time in her life, actually enjoying what she was doing. She looked happy and gave me hope that I could still find joy in small things. I asked for the check, but kept sitting there watching her. The real world could wait a little longer. I still go there every day and ask for a coffee. That's all I need. Just a coffee and her beautiful smile.
This poem is the Good Lord Bird. Good Lord Bird was recently nominated for a National Book Award by James McBride. It's a novel that tells the story of John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. And in the book itself, it says that, McBride says that the Good Lord Bird is a person, or in this case it actually was a woodpecker, a rare woodpecker, but it's a bird that is so beautiful that when you see it, you go, good Lord. And that John Brown has this effect on people that when you meet him, this charisma that he had, this being that he brought to what he was doing, had the same kind of effect. And so that's why I think he gave the title of the book, The Good Lord Bird. And after I read it, I was moved by this thought of the audaciousness of what John Brown tried to do. And it also was around when we were still working on our shutdown of the government. And so I was moved by this idea of these people who are true believers in what they're doing, and you know, to hell with the cost. You have to win at all costs. And so these things were rolling through my head as I thought about the Good Lord Bird. This is a meditation on John Brown. Faith can only push you so far. At some time, you just have to have it deep in the marrow of your bones, like John Brown knew. You got to walk that lonesome valley. You got to walk it by yourself. Oh, nobody else can walk it for you. You got to walk it for yourself. Moon-mad fool for justice, beyond hope or care, beyond anything this flesh is heir to. He carried the word into bloody Kansas. Them bones, them dry bones, them bones, them bones, them dry bones, them bones, them bones, them dry bones. As Icarus soared in the rising thermals, possessed by timeless ecstasy, so the leader of the Osawatomie Rifles rode his army of glory toward Harper's Ferry.
My name is Elaine Pollard. I'm actually Michaela Pollard's mom, and I just wanted to kind of give a little background as to why I'm here in reading for her. Michaela is my daughter, and she is a college student. And when she was 7, she told me that she wanted to be a writer. And that has been the only thing that she's ever said that she's ever wanted to be since she was 7. And so she started writing, and this story that she wrote is based on my mother's life. And it's her first story that she wrote that got published, and she was very excited, and she wanted to read it tonight, but being a college student, she had to work, and so I offhandedly said that I would read it for her, and the next thing I knew, she had sent in my name to whoever organized this, and so here I am. So I'm just gonna kind of read a little bit of Little Willie. Like I said, it's a story based on my mother. The hot Louisiana sun bears down on me, and as hard as I try to focus on working, I feel just like giving up. But God knows I ain't gonna do that. If my aunt so much as sees me stop for a second, she's sure to whip me good. More than likely, she'll just yell at me. Lord, sometimes I swear that woman was a slave. Well, her mama and daddy were. They had lots of children, including my aunt. Her name is Lila, and she's actually my great aunt. I call her Aunt. She was the oldest of 13 children. She raised them all after her mama died, and she raised my mama too. Raising all those children must have really worn her, because she sure don't seem to take a liking to me. I try to picture my aunt in her younger years happy, smiling, but every time my mind just switches back to how she is now, old and mean. Sometimes I wonder if she was old and mean all her life. Then I tell myself, no, she couldn't have. She was once a child like me who laughed and cried and skinned her knees. Only difference between her and me is that she had to become a woman much faster. My aunt always told me that she never wanted to go to school. She wanted to work. Well, I see what work has done for my aunt. Sometimes I wonder if she's proud of the farm that she and Uncle Geese worked together. If she's proud, she don't show it. She just keeps working. Lots of kids at my school work in the cotton fields and pick pecans to help their families. Sometimes I go with them, but I know I don't have to. My aunt and uncle own 90 acres of land. I don't know how much 90 acres is, but when I sit on the back porch and look at our land, I know that 90 acres must go on forever. We always have plenty of food, and in the summertime, we eat the best fruits and vegetables. The first day of school, and I'm not even dressed. My aunt woke me up before the sun to do work, and I knew better than to argue with her. In her mind, work comes before school or even sleep. 1,000 protests screamed in my mind, but I was wise in keeping my mouth shut. I'm barely up 5 minutes before I meet Aunt's sharp displeasure. "Lil gal," she scolds, "you best hurry up and milk them cows, walking like you got molasses in your legs." So what do? I hurry and milk the cows. I strain in my seat, trying to listen to Miss Nelson, but Leroy keeps tapping me on the shoulder. I ignore him, knowing what he wants. He won't let up. "Willie," he whispers, "you got some candy?" "I know you got some candy." This boy is always asking me for candy. All last year, he asked for the peppermint candy and candy bars I got at lunchtime. It got so bad I had to hide the candy from him. Now here he is bothering me on the first day of school. Well, I'm not giving in to him. "Ask your mama for candy. I don't got any." Of course I'm lying. I just bought a whole bunch of candy at lunchtime. Leroy knows I'm lying. "You a liar," he says. Miss Nelson looks right at us. "Miss Hampton, do I need to whip you, or are you going to pay attention?" Why is she getting on me? I give Leroy a dirty look. "Class, we are going on a field trip to Baton Rouge." I instantly perk up. Baton Rouge? I've heard a lot about Baton Rouge, but the most exciting thing is the fair. Miss Nelson continues, "Children, make sure you ask your parents for money. Baton Rouge is a long way and there's a lot to do." My heart sinks. I know Aunt wouldn't give me the money for the field trip. She barely gives me money to eat lunch at school. If I want to eat lunch at school, I normally have to spend all day picking cotton or pecans. Asking Aunt to give me money is like asking the sun not to shine. I head out to recess disheartened. My friend Eloise and my cousin Jean Alice walk up beside me. I can tell from their expressions that they are excited about the field trip. "I can't wait," Eloise says. "It might even be more fun than Honolulu." Jean Alice gives her a look. "Girl, you know you ain't been to no Honolulu." Eloise's face grows red. "I have too been to Honolulu." I decide to be the peacemaker before an argument starts. The whole time I'm thinking about Aunt and how she will respond to the field trip. I have to come up with a plan. I almost dreaded going home and facing her, knowing she wasn't going to give me any money. Then I had a brilliant idea. I couldn't persuade my aunt to let me go to Baton Rouge, but my teacher could. And since Aunt couldn't read or write, she wouldn't be able to tell that such a note had actually been written by me. I tore out a piece of paper from my notebook, explaining to Aunt that I was Willie's teacher and that she needed to go on the field trip to Baton Rouge or she would fail. I was certain my plan would work, even though I felt a little guilty. How many trips to Baton Rouge would there be? My plan didn't exactly work the way I wanted it to. My aunt took one look at that note and she shook her head. "Don't no teacher write like that." I shouldn't have underestimated her. My aunt can't read, but she certainly isn't dumb. All my hopes of eating cotton candy and riding Ferris wheels faded away. I would be the only student in the whole school to stay back, while everyone else had fun. I would probably have to clean chalkboards or wash dishes in the cafeteria. I know I can't argue with my aunt. Whatever she says is the law. I'm afraid if I do talk back to her, I'll get struck by lightning, and I don't know which would be scarier, getting whipped by Aunt or getting struck by lightning. In my mind, they're about equal. Aunt is almost like God, only I can see her every day. Uncle Geese comes in around 6 o'clock. He works in Alexandria building houses. When he comes home, he and I like to watch the Grand Ole Opry, but Aunt doesn't approve. She thinks it's heathen. We like to listen to the radio also. Today he comes in, he's all sweaty, and he tells Aunt he's ready for a good meal. Lil gal says she needs some money for Baton Rouge, Aunt says. Uncle Geese looks at me. Uncle Geese is a little over 6 feet with reddish skin and graying hair. "Frog, when you going to Baton Rouge?" Uncle Geese calls me Frog even though I hate them. One summer a frog jumped on me and I just about died. I tell them I need the money for the field trip our class is taking in October, a month away. Uncle Geese frowns. "Suppose I got some money." He reaches into his pocket and gets out his brown wallet, handing me $3. I can barely contain my excitement thanking him. "Y'all better get your grub if you want it before it get cold," Aunt says. We have ham, cornbread, greens, and sweet potatoes for dinner. Later, Uncle Geese and I listen to the radio. Tonight, I say my prayers, thanking God for all his blessings. I lay in my bed and listen to the trains far away in the distance, and I think about the people on the trains. As I drift to sleep, I think about all I want to do in my life. Someday, I'll travel the world, singing on stages in front of millions of people, or maybe I'll be a dancer, wearing beautiful outfits. For now, I'm just little Willie.
I have 2 photographs One is on page 44. I usually like taking photographs of people, mostly candid shots when strangers are unaware that I'm around there with my camera. But I also like taking pictures that kind of show the absence of people. That somebody should be there or appears to be there, but really is not. So I came across this abandoned house in West Virginia with a chair on the porch, and I can't believe anybody living there, but who knows. The other photograph is on page 38. Reflections and shadows are kind of my favorite scenes, and I came across what I thought was this incredible reflection of the Capitol on the U.S. Capitol reflection pool. And I was facing the Capitol, so if you hold it upside down, you see the original image. And I just inverted it in Photoshop. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Ethan Fugate. I'm here to read a piece I wrote back in 2010. But first, I'd like to say thank you to the editors and everybody for showing up tonight. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and it's always nice to see people show up and support local artists, and it's always nice for people to be interested in this stuff because this is something I'm very passionate about. I would like to call to attention, though, as my second. There's a misprint in line 8. It's not supposed to be the brave, the naive. It's supposed to be the brave, the knave. The naive makes it seem a little bit sweeter than what this poem actually is about. And with that, I'll tell you the story of how I actually wrote this poem. Back in 2010, I was doing a reading in Baltimore City, where I used to live, and I met a really nice girl there, and 2 days later I saw her at my friend of mine was playing a show and in his band, and I saw her there, and then long story short, the next morning I woke up and I wrote this and left it on her nightstand and then left. But this piece is called Red Canary. If only I could rejoice with loud, thunderous booms of internal combustion engines backfiring, the brave, the knave, still lying adjacent to colonnades of brunette pillars, wishing fingers to gently caress them timidly. Thank you.
My story starts on page 39. I'm just going to go into it. Marianne was seated alone at her kitchen table, her eyes swollen with the wistful veracity that she had experienced many times before. The cup of coffee had been there since 7 that morning. It was now 11. Since Chris's death, the tendency for her to be awoken before dawn had been merely eerily maintained. He'd always wake her before leaving for work. The ill-mannered means of his ways were never acknowledged as disruptive or discourteous. Be it the mortgage or any other piece of foolishness, Chris always figured it best to unload his litany before dawn, and now, even in his absence, something always succeeded in waking her prematurely. As she sat at the table, her eyes drifted over towards the pantry. Even if she were hungry, there was hardly a thing in the house for her to eat. Chris had never seen the point of additional snack food. Even if he had, the meager grocery budget that he asserted for Marianne would hardly have been able to cover it. For 18 years, he disregarded inflation, the grocery budget remaining a stagnant $100 a week. She began to grow sore, though, so she rose from her seat and padded dolefully to the linen closet, where she removed a cumbersome vacuum cleaner. Like the grocery budget, the vacuum cleaner was almost archaic, for Chris had never given her supplemental money for a new one. She troublesomely lugged it into the living room and plugged its battered cord into the socket. Chris, she thought, will hate coming home to a dirty house. So she vacuumed the entire first floor, ignoring the second one, but Chris was invariably more lenient in allowing it to go ignored. Around 11:30, having finished her morning chores, she thought it due time for a shower. She washed and shampooed herself with the store brand because it was just as good as the more expensive brands. When she finished, she reached her hand out from the frosted glass door and clutched her towel. She dried off in the shower. Otherwise, as Chris had said, she'd soak the bath mat and pave the way for mold or even more insidious bacterium. It was now almost 1, her free time. She could read or perhaps even watch some television. However, she conceded to fatigue and lay down on the sofa for what she thought was going to be a brief nap. The sound of school children arriving home woke her. The faint glow from her cable box read 4:15. I've overslept, she thought. It was imperative that dinner be ready by 5. She hastily lifted herself from the sofa and rushed to the kitchen. Luckily, she had a pot roast from the day before that only needed to be reheated. She flicked the burner on and gently placed the pot on it. When it was finished, she made herself a plate, careful not to spill it on the stove. Chris hated when she spilt things on the stove. After she had finished eating, she placed her dish in the sink and went about making an additional plate. Turning the oven to its warm setting, she opened it and removed a plate of spoiled dinner, depositing the fresh dish in its place. Afterwards, she washed the dishes, plaintively humming as she went about scrumming away grime. Next to her was a pitifully neglected dishwasher, but Chris had said ad nauseum that it was too expensive to run, so she never used it. Like she had done in the morning, Marian rested at the kitchen table until 7:30. It was now bedtime. Chris had always diligently maintained a strict sleep regimen. He had to be up for work in the morning, and the last thing he wanted was for Marian to be awake disturbing his sleep, so he always ensured that she retired to bed at the same time as him. As she brushed her hair in the mirror, she recalled her vivacious youth. She had such pretty hair then, but now it was wilted and dry. It was these moments in the day that she looked forward to, the times when, even if just for an instant, she could nostalgically remember her youth. It was the one thing, the only thing, that Chris couldn't take away from her. She tucked her pallid frame under the comforter as slivers of moonlight rested gracefully upon her blanket. It was heartrending to see, really, because although she'd never realized it, just as Chris had haunted her in life, for the few years that she had left on Earth, he would continue to haunt her in death.
My poem is on page 34, and it is Unrequited Love. Unrequited love. When will you requite my love? When I am in a pine box looking up, when it is suitable for you to cry your tears and say, I too loved him. By then it will not be necessary, for I will have moved on and will not require nor desire this need of love that you wish to express. For the need will be lost and its meaning will be meaningless. Requite my love now while my heart still beats and my flesh still tingles when it hears the words, I love you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ed Maroney, and I'm losing my voice. I'm going to try and struggle through this. My story's on page 28. It's called 1XD, One Chicken Dinner, and I'll just lay it out for you. When I was a young boy, going back into the 60s, I worked in a restaurant called Mr. Chicken. It was in Bowie, and I was one of the clerks there. And the gentleman I worked for, who was the owner of the store, he was very cantankerous, difficult to get along with, and unbeknownst to me, he would become one of the great characters in my life and have a significant influence on my outlook. And so I wrote this story about him, and you have to develop this picture of him. He's about average height, average build. He had a bald head, but a white fringe of hair around his head, and he had these black horn-rimmed glasses all the time. Throughout his life, he'd always wear the same glasses. And he smoked way too much in those days. And I'm just going to read a portion, starting on page 29. He was often short and temperamental with his customers. He did not accept complaints well. When a customer would come in and ask for all white meat or dark meat, or they did not want any wings, I would just stand back and watch occur the subtle humiliation of the customer. You see, God made chickens a certain way, and each has 2 breasts, thighs, legs, and wings. A 4-piece dinner comes with a breast, thigh, leg, and wing. That is the way he served his meals, and he was not going to change it based upon a customer's request. Of course, we served 3-piece dinners too, but he never explained to me how he decided what pieces went into that meal. Well, regardless, his product was just so good that he could get away with upsetting the occasional customer. In town, they talked about what a contrary bastard he was, but that his chicken was some kind of good. I had seen some customers depart the store muttering about how they were going to come back and burn the place down. To me, he was a contrary son of a bitch at times. He was also one of the great men I would admire in my life. I learned much from him, and although it took a while, I also learned he had a great sense of humor and liked to play practical jokes. I and other clerks liked to occasionally call the store or another clerk, and when he or the other clerk answered, Mr. Chicken, we always asked, is this Mr. Chicken? Invariably, the answer was always a subtly irritated response of yes, which set up the moment when we responded, well, this is Mrs. Chicken, get your ass home. and hang up. Okay, so you had to be there. We thought it was funny. Still do now that I think about it. One time when we had expanded his menu to include hamburgers, he liked to slip a plastic cup cover under the patty and then studiously watch you take your first bite. He loved the puzzled expression that would invariably appear on your face while questioningly looking at your hamburger. It would be many years before I could trust a cheeseburger again. When business was slow, we would talk about many things. He would sit in the back of the store, invariably smoking, while telling me about his youth. He grew up in Michigan, and in his first business, he owned a drive-in hamburger restaurant, which he lost to his first wife in a divorce. He never had a kind word for that woman. In my limited and developing cognition abilities, I could tell he had been deeply hurt. During World War II, he had worked in a bomber aircraft factory. He was a critical skilled laborer and therefore was exempt from the draft. He moved to Maryland to start his chicken restaurant, but mostly to escape his ex-wife. He was married again by the time he moved to Maryland, but she was 20 years his junior in age, which I thought was pretty cool and gave me great hope for my old age someday. She was Italian, and he said they were the best women to marry. So later I married an Italian too, but I'm not so sure his advice was as insightful on that occasion. Once when I was in a car with him, when he was backing his Buick out of his driveway, he stopped suddenly and said, "Look at that rock." There was a large rock about the size of a football at the edge of the curb next to his driveway. It was multifaceted and reflected earthy pinks and beige hues in the sunlight. He said it was a rock whose consistency was of quartz. He thought it was interesting and remarked the way the sun played across the varied surfaces. I thought it was just a rock and never gave it another thought. Why would anyone take time out to look at a rock? That's enough.
That was really great. Thank you all very much for coming. Can we get one more round of applause for all the people who read today? Really well done. And so I want to just tell you, you can come up and help yourself to more magazines. I want to thank the English Honor Society for providing the reception cookies and drinks. And have a safe drive home. And hopefully we'll see you back here next semester for another round of readings. Okay, thanks.